and welcome back to Miss Ellis's At Home Learning. We've got another book today. It's the third in our Frank Asch series. So we've read these two already. This is going to be our third. It is the sixth in the sequence of read alouds at home so far. So just to remind you, these are meant to be done as a family. It helps to have an adult there to facilitate that conversation, to pause the video, to talk with your child, and really pull out the big thinking that's embedded within the work we're doing. So we're going to do one more tomorrow or next time. That's another one in the Frank Asch series, and then we'll start another mini unit. So kiddos, think about this story from last time, Moon Dance. Take a second and tell somebody who's with you what happened in the story. What was it about? Now, families, if they're still talking, pause here. Now that we've thought about what this one was about yesterday, right, called Moon Dance, and there he is dancing with the moon, let's move on to today's Mooncake. So think about what happened in the previous stories we've read. The title is Mooncake, and then looking at this illustration, what predictions do you have about what might happen in this story? I'm going to move you closer. What predictions do you have about what might happen? So pause here, continue talking together. So right away I notice, for example, the book is called Mooncake, and then it looks like Bear is eating something. So I'm wondering if those two things go together. I also notice that the ground is covered in something, and there's a candle here. And those look like they might be clues to help me understand what's coming. Mooncake by Frank Asch. There's that hint, just like we've had in the other books, right? He gives us a little picture. Whoopsies. Little picture at the beginning. Mooncake by Frank Asch. And look at that. Just like we've been seeing in the other books, there's hints. So let's see. Let's look at those four in order. Can you tell what's happening in those pictures? Talk together. What's going on in those pictures? What does the author want us to see? Okay, there's some clues. One summer night. Now that's an interesting clue. He hasn't done that before. This book, Moon Dance, began one night. Skyfire began oops, I need both hands. Skyfire began one day, but now this one says one summer night. That's an interesting little bit of information to give us. One summer night, Bear and his friend Little Bird sat down to watch the moon. After a while, Little Bird said, "I think I feel hungry." "Me too," replied Bear. "And you know what I wish? I wish I could just jump up and take a bite out of the moon. How delicious that would be." Do you think the moon would be delicious? "How do you know?" chirped Little Bird. "Maybe the moon doesn't taste good at all. Maybe it tastes terrible." I don't know if you use this in your classrooms, but this hand gesture means me too. You sort of point it. Oops, how can you see it? You point it to and from your body. That's a way of saying, I agree with you, or that's what I was going to say. I was thinking the same thing as Little Bird. I don't know if the moon would taste very good at all. Bear thought for a moment. Then he went inside and got his bow and arrow. With a piece of string, he attached a spoon to the arrow. Look at here in this picture. What do you think he's going to do with that? Let's see. Then he went outside again and shot the spoon at the moon. Were you right? Did you guess it? That's great. I knew that wouldn't work, said Little Bird. The moon is just too far away. What you need is a rocket ship. Then I shall build one, said Bear. The very next day, Bear went to the junkyard and bought everything he thought he would need to build a rocket ship. The light is not very good today. I'm sorry about that. Wow. Look at what he's created so far. That's pretty impressive. All summer long. So there's another mention. Remember that first line, where he said one summer day or one summer night? And now they mention summer again. All summer long. That's an interesting detail. All summer long, Bear and Little Bird worked and worked. But when fall came, the rocket ship was still not finished. I would like to go with you, said Little Bird, but winter is coming. I must fly south with the flock. So Bear and Little Bird said goodbye. So this is a really good point to stop and talk. So where we live, many of us, not everybody, but where we live, we get a lot of seasons, right? We have 4 seasons every year and the weather changes. So what animals do changes depending upon the time of year. So let's take a second and talk. What do you know about what animals do in the wintertime? So we have 2 examples in this book. We have a bird and a bear. As a family, talk together. What are the things that those animals do to survive the winter? And then after you're done talking about birds and bears in real life, think about any other animals you know and what they do for the winter. Pause here so you can talk. So now that you're done talking about what animals do, let's make sure we all are having the same understanding. So a lot of birds, but not all, a lot of birds actually fly away in the wintertime. So when it starts getting cold in the fall, they fly all together and they fly south or down across the earth to where it's a little bit warmer during the winter time. So a lot of birds will fly south for the winter, stay down there while it's warmer. And then as it starts to warm up, they fly back up. And then every year they do that same thing, they fly. And that's called migration. So that's a really good word to know. They migrate. So they move from one part of the world to another in a pattern. Now, bears, on the other hand, do they migrate? No, they really don't go long distances. So what they do is do you know that fancy word? They hibernate. So that means what they do is they find a safe place, like a den. They make it safe and warm for themselves, and then they hunker down and they sleep. So they pretty much rest through the winter time so they never have to come out when it's snowy and too cold. So those are 2 very different ways. Well, I guess they're actually kind of similar in some ways, right? They escape the cold. 2 different ways that animals survive the cold. So in this book, so far, it says, winter is coming, I must fly south with the flock. So far, Bird is doing just what birds do in real life. Even though this is fiction, it's from somebody's imagination, he's doing what real birds do. When it began to get cold and the leaves fell off the trees, Bear got sleepy. Why do you think he's getting sleepy? But instead of climbing into bed and sleeping through the winter, right, hibernating, he kept right on working. He worked and worked until the rocket ship was finished. Then he climbed inside and began the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. But before he reached 1, he fell asleep. Why do you think he fell asleep? Talk about that together. Pause here and talk about it. He slept and slept and slept. What was happening while he was sleeping? Do you see? Until one night, the wind knocked over his rocket ship. Bear had never been awake in the winter before. When he opened his eyes and saw all the snow, guess what he thought? He thought he had landed on the moon. He climbed out of his rocket ship, scooped up some snow, and made a little mooncake. Then he tasted it. It tasted like something he had tasted before, but he wasn't quite sure what it was. What do you think? What do you think that mooncake tasted like? While he thought about that, he decided to go for a walk. He didn't want to go too far because he was afraid that he would get lost. So he just walked in a big circle. After a while, he came upon his own paw prints in the snow. Look, there they are. Those are his paw prints. There. These paw prints are too big to belong to a moon mouse or even a moon raccoon, thought Bear. Maybe they were made by a moon bear or perhaps, he shuddered, a terrible moon monster. Bear felt scared. He ran back to his rocket ship and prepared for takeoff. So were those footprints from a moon monster? No, they were from himself. They were his own footprints. Let's see what happens when he takes his rocket ship. Again, he began the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. And again, he fell asleep. This time he slept until spring. Do you have any predictions about what might happen in the next part of the story? One day, his friend Little Bird returned and woke him up. How was everything down south? Asked Bear. Just fine, said Little Bird. Did you go to the moon? Asked Little Bird. I sure did, said Bear. And how did the moon taste? Asked Little Bird. Was it terrible? No, replied Bear. It was delicious. So I have a few questions for you. I'll ask you the question, and grown-ups, I think you should pause after each question so you can really talk about it and make sure your children understand the answers to those questions. So my first question is, did Bear really go to the moon? So pause here, talk about it. Now, how can we tell what really happened? What are some clues in the book that tell you what really happened to Bear? Pause here. Try to remember some details. So now that you've talked about that question, let's go back and look at it together. So there were some clues here, and I found them as we were reading because they kind of stood out as being a little different from other books. So one clue was right here at the beginning where it said one summer night. And then when we got to this page, it says, all summer long. And then later on, Little Bird says, winter is coming. So those are some clues that tell us that the seasons are changing, right? Just like we saw in those pictures, you probably noticed at the beginning that they showed the changing seasons going from summer to spring to, fall. Yeah. Do they go in order? Oh, this is fall. Got it. I was reading that wrong. So there's fall, winter, spring, and summer. So it shows the seasons changing. And they gave us clues about the seasons changing in the book. It said he slept, he kept right on working through the winter. And then it said later here, this time he slept until spring. So there's all these little clues in the book that tell you time is passing and the seasons are changing. So those are little clues that help you understand what's really happening. Now let's go back to thinking about all 3 of the books we've read so far. I'm going to ask you to think about some things about those books, pause the video, talk about it, and then I'll show you things I want you to notice. So thinking about Moonbear, right? These 3 stories we've read so far. I want you to think about what are some things you are noticing are themes or patterns in the Moonbear books. So there's a lot of really cool things you can notice if you really think about what sort of things are happening in the stories and what things repeat. So pause here and talk about it, and then I'm going to show you what I want you to notice. So now that you have talked about it together, let's see some of the things that from a teacher standpoint, I really want you to notice about these books. So first of all, I started in the last, at the end of the last part to talk about some of the language that's repeating in these books. So if you remember, the way each book begins is kind of similar. So this one begins one summer night. This one begins one day. And this one begins one night. So already we notice a pattern in how the author starts the story. So as we start the next book next time, we'll think about, okay, is it going to follow that same pattern? Something else I want you to understand is about Bear and the way Bear thinks. So have you noticed that Bear kind of gets a little confused sometimes? So in this story, what was he confused about? Yeah, he thought he was dancing with the moon, but really it was a puddle. What was he confused about in this one? Yeah, he thought the sky was on fire, but it was a rainbow. Let's go this way. Right? It was a rainbow. He thought what? Yeah, he thought he landed on the moon, but really it was snow. So far there's this pattern of this character getting a little confused and thinking things that aren't really happening. Another theme in the books are these little hints at the beginning. I hope you noticed that as you were talking together, right? These little clues that get you thinking about what's going to happen in the story. Another theme, so far it's in 2 of these. What do these books have in common? Moon Dance and Mooncake. Yeah, they both are about something to do with the moon. That's why we call him Moonbear. And there's one more theme that I want you to notice, which is kind of hard to explain, but this was about like rain and fog and clouds. This was about seasons changing, and this was about a rainbow. So they all kind of use this theme of weather or natural phenomena that happen that he doesn't really understand. So those are 5 important themes I really want you to be noticing as we go into our next book. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.